So hi again, I'm Ketan. I'm the head of engineering at Specmatic. I'll just quickly dive in. How many here have written an OpenAPI specification or modified one, right? Quite a few, right? How simple or difficult was it? Like if you thought it was simple, put your hand down, right? Before, well, either way, I guess, yeah. Yeah, so like OpenAPI specs, they're long YAML documents. Nobody really likes YAML documentation. I don't have hair to pull, but it's genuinely not ever fun working with YAML documents and particularly API specs, which are extremely long. Thousands of lines, if not tens of thousands, right? Making sense of these API specifications is also almost always a challenge, right? Try throwing a 10,000 line YAML at a chat bot or OpenAPI or whatever, right? It can't possibly comprehend it, right? You run out of memory or tokens or whatever, right? So how do you work with these sort of OpenAPI specifications, right? That's as a company that works with specifications. That was a question that we sort of pondered. The second problem is as a product manager or a product owner, right? You come up with an idea, right? Your head of engineering or architect says, hey, this is not possible, right? So how do you explore building APIs or services without having the ability to write a specification, right? So I'll sort of showcase a quick sort of demo, right? And talk about what was the vision and how we went about implementing it. I'll talk about the architecture a bit, and I'm at the booth here, so happy to have a chat in terms of anyone want to do a deep dive in terms of the architecture, etc. Right? So, I mean, the point again is extremely simple, right? How do you oops. Yeah, so I think I've briefed on this. You have requirements, right? The product owner or manager comes up with requirements. A developer needs to take these, understand those requirements, come up with a spec. Then you build some sort of a backend, a front end. You test it, bug fix it, whatnot, right? It's a fairly long cycle to actually get feedback on whether your idea actually works, right? It's an extremely long timeline, right? Even in the age of AI, that can certainly take a few days, if not weeks, to build that. You can't really validate your hypothesis, right, until your backend and front end is ready, right? And any change, you have to sort of go back to the drawing board in some ways, right? So how, like, what are the fixes for this, or what are the solutions to this, right? With this tool that I'm going to demonstrate, right, you can actually design and test an implementation right in your browser, right, in a couple of minutes, in fact, right? If you have ideas, hypothesis in terms of, will my API be able to answer these sort of questions, right? You can validate that right there. And you can obviously, catch design issues earlier rather than, towards the end once the application or your service is built up, right? Left shift, right? That's the whole intent. Right? At a very high level, the design is fairly simple, right? There's an OpenAPI agent. It understands your prompts. It sort of does the usual classification of intent. Sends it to an MCP server. The MCP server basically has a whole lot of tools plugged into that MCP server. Each tool sort of understands each of your APIs really well, right? So if your specification has a dozen APIs, we'll have a dozen MCP tools underneath, right? So that helps with the memory management, quick responses, so on and so forth, right? And then this secret sauce, right? Custom API simulation engine. So given an API specification, that engine basically gives back requests and responses which conform to that specification. Right? So any questions so far? I'll just quickly do a demo here, right? Yeah. So I'm logged in into the tool, right? And I will just give it a prompt. Let me just copy paste this from my clipboard, right? Right. So here's my prompt. Let me just zoom in a bit, right? So I want to create a e-commerce sort of a service, right? I want to have the ability to create an order, right? I want the ability to retrieve a specific order, right? So that's a very simple sort of a prompt, right? And then I give a few more details in terms of what I mean by being able to define a product and how do I go about creating an order, right? So these are the four sort of broad parameters that I need to create a product to create an order, right? The list of products, where I want that order to be placed, whether it's a corporate order or a non-corporate order, and any sort of discount coupons or codes, right? So let me throw this at the AI, right? It'll do its thing, take a few seconds. More than a few seconds. Yeah, okay, perfect. Um, so it sort of summarized what it thought about your prompt, right? So it sort of gave a nice summary or paraphrase what your input prompt was. On the right side, you'd sort of see a very familiar interface if you come from the OpenAPI or Swagger side of things, right? You can see it has two API endpoints, right? Somewhere you can post an order and to get a specific order, right? That was my requirement, right? Now, based on my prompt, it has figured out like the schema of the request response objects, right? So a product item will have a product ID and a quantity, right? The order will obviously have a list of orders, right, or list of products, right, order ID, region, so on and so forth, right. Can obviously go and look at the YAML spec for this. Now let's see what I can do, right. As now as a product manager or product owner, I want to go and query this API, right? So you'll see that the spec already has details in terms of some sort of examples in there, right? So let's see, for example, um, the get order, right? So this seems to have this example here, right? So I'm going to say fetch me the order with ID that, right? Oh, typo. Yeah, so it actually went ahead and fetched this order, right? How the hell did that happen, right? So that's the secret sauce behind the scenes, right? We have a server in the backend which understands this specification. It understood the examples in the specification, and the MCP actually made a call to the API endpoint and then fetched that specific order, right? Now, let's see if I can now create an order, right? So let's say I should have mirrored this. Yeah. So this is probably too far down for most people to see, but I'm now saying create me an order in the, let's say, Europe region, right? And it's a corporate order and a discount code, right? Now let's see what it does here, right? Yeah, so it says, okay, I have this endpoint that lets me create an order. It fired a query, and that's what the request and response for that looks like, right? Now, interestingly, the next thing you'd want to say is, can I list all my orders, right? I have all these orders in my basket or whatever, right? List all the orders. Right, so it has classified the intent, right? It figured out, hey, this sort of an API does not quite exist. So do you want to go ahead and implement it, right? So I say, yes, please go ahead and implement it, right? And we'll go back to the spec and see what it does. Yeah, so it gave you a nice little diff, right? The thing in green is what it added to the specification. So you can see it added a new get operation. Now let's see if I can ask it, get me a list of all the orders, right? Oops, of fetch. Yeah, still a work in progress, as you can all see, right? Oops. Okay, sorry about that. Pitfalls of doing a live demo, right? So anyway, so this would actually, now go and hit the endpoint to. Did I make a typo or something? It's hard to see. No, it's fine. Yeah. So anyway, sorry about that. So at this point, it'll go and hit the endpoint again, and it'll list all your orders with the specific IDs, right? So it's a smart mock. At the end, it actually maintains state at that side, right? And it'll give you back the results, right? So that's the sort of thing that you can do with this, right? Obviously, you can also upload existing specifications that you have, right? So um, if you want to integrate with like an existing API, right? Obviously, you can just upload an existing specifications and then start asking questions. I want to build this sort of a report. Now, what sort of API calls do I need to make? What sort of fields do I fetch from what API? And it'll help you with that, right? So it'll make all those requests, demonstrate using examples what you can do, and so on and so forth, right? So I think that's pretty much for the demo, right? I will take any questions that you have so far. Right? I'll also be at the booth here. If you want to talk more, understand more about the technology and the implementation behind this, still a work in progress. So happy to share and learn, of course.
So I saw that you actually added the missing functionality list orders, which created the diff in the OpenAPI spec. But how do you call that? I mean, like without the actual API being present, how will that call work?
So we actually have a smart mock, right? So that's actually part of Specmatic itself, right?
Okay.
So what that smart mock does is it understands your OpenAPI spec, and it fundamentally understands the request and responses schema, right? So it can dynamically generate data, or it can validate that data, right? So if you were to ask that tool to say, give me an order object, it'll give you an order object, right? So we actually stand up an intelligent mock effectively.
Okay, so the data then is in your control, and based on that, it's able to
correct. So it's not really an application, right? At best, it's a mock which understands some of the restful semantics, right? And it works with that. So
how do you equate it into the real world applications? This use case.
So the intent is to come up with a API specification, right? Obviously, you can feed the specification into an AI and have it build the app, or if you want to enhance the add features to a specification, throw it at an AI tool, and most of them seem to do a decent job at it, right? But obviously the implementation is not something I can help with, right? Like there's obviously other things that you would do with an order, right? You talk to 10 other services, inventory and whatnot, right? So that's up to the implementation to work.
Suppose I'm a user, and I am using some application, but I don't have that mock. How will I make use of this?
So I mean, I can demonstrate that at the booth again, right? Okay. But like the secret sauce, which I called out, like that's just part of Specmatic, right? So you can, in theory, point your user interface to this mock, right? So you can start building the user interface without having the
mock is built from the OpenAPI.
Yeah, exactly. The general purpose mock, right? So.
Hi, thanks for the talk. One question, if I give it the API specification, can it also suggest improvements or something I might have not thought of?
Some kinds, yes. But again, it depends on the prompts that you give it, right? Obviously, there's scope to refine it. There's, the usual hallucinations that can happen, but yeah.
Thanks.
If you ask for improvements to specific areas, then it can actually make those suggestions.
Hi. From the demo, right, we also see like where you changed it from YAML to the preview. You also have MCP. What is that about?
Oh, do you want to take that? Since you're more familiar with it, yeah.
So the original reason why we built Genie was that we had a lot of our large clients that wanted basically to take the APIs and expose them to agents, right? And so we were trying to ask them like, what's the business case that you're trying to validate? What's the business case that you're trying to satisfy, and whether you've validated that business case or not? So, that a lot of people is like, okay, we'll basically expose it through an MCP and then we'll figure it out, right? So that's where we said, okay, can we build like a sandbox where people can first design an API, play around with it. Once you're happy, then you can publish the MCP, all right? So you can get an MCP right out of the box. That's the idea.
Yeah, so that tab basically contains a reference to a Docker image. You can just do a Docker pull and stand up an MCP for it. No, GraphQL is currently not supported.
GraphQL is dead. This is a very interesting topic, right? So when you try and if you ask what's the main purpose for GraphQL, right? What's the business case for GraphQL was predominantly because of underfetching, overfetching, those were the primary things. But security, always a challenge, right? So now a lot of people are claiming that with MCP and other kinds of things. And when you have intelligent agents running, you can actually optimize all of these dynamically without trying to do this like upfront. And so that's a very interesting way to look at solving those two problems, but also adding intelligence, right? So that's why a lot of people make that statement that GraphQL is dead and like this is kind of becoming the new future. It'll be interesting to see how it'll play out, but certainly something to look at.
Okay, thanks a lot. Oh, there's one last question. Okay.
Actually, two questions. The first one is, does this support adding API design standards on top of it, maybe like spectral rule set or enabling the tool to generate spec that follow a design standard?
Yeah, so that's a very common thing. We've not exposed that as an external thing. That's something we need to do. But what we have is based on our own experience and certain best practices that we have. So when, if you turn, when Ketan, I don't know if you did an upload.
No, I didn't.
Just generate. So there's when you have an existing API specification to upload, then what we do is we look at that and we clean up that specification based on a thing. And so now a lot of people are saying, okay, can you externalize those rules so that we can tweak it as per what we want? So that's something that we want to release next. But we do have an internal thing through which we actually do a cleanup. You'll be able to see the changes.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ketan and Naresh added on.